Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Raphael, and for 8 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. Quinn and I met in college, got married right after graduation, and built what I believed was a solid life together. We both had good jobs, a nice house in the suburbs, and what seemed like a future full of possibilities. I worked in an established real estate company, and Quinn was an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. The beginning of our marriage was smooth. Quinn would text me during the day, send me funny pictures, and remember little things I mentioned. She was really invested in our relationship and seemed like the kind of wife who genuinely cared about making our marriage work. We had our share of small problems like any couple, but nothing that felt serious. One thing that created friction for us was her unexpected mood swings that sometimes lasted for a few days, and in those days she would be distant, but she'd always bounce back. She'd blame it on work stress, or say she was just tired. I'd try to cheer her up, take her out to dinner, or suggest a weekend getaway. I'd do all that with the hope that it would fix whatever was bothering her. The thing about being betrayed by someone you trust completely is that you don't see it coming. There were probably signs I missed, but when you believe someone loves you the way you love them, you don't look for evidence that they're lying to you every day. Quinn's work had always been demanding, especially during tax season or when they had big audits. She'd come home exhausted, complaining about her boss or difficult clients. I'd listen and try to be supportive. When she started working later more often, I figured it was just a busy period that would pass. The late nights became more frequent over a few months. Quinn would text me around 5 p.m., saying she'd be stuck at the office until 8 or 9. Then it became 10 or 11. Sometimes she wouldn't get home until after midnight, looking tired and giving all the excuses in the world for the delay. Quinn was still affectionate with me, still made plans for us to do things together on weekends. She still said she loved me every day and seemed to mean it. My job in real estate could be unpredictable. Sometimes I'd have to stay late to finish a campaign or meet with clients who could only do evening calls. But I also had flexibility that let me leave early sometimes, especially if I closed more deals. I'd usually text Quinn to let her know when I was heading home, and she'd do the same for me. One Thursday in March, I'd been following up on a deal for most of the week, staying late to follow the paperwork and meeting up with the developers to get things in order. That Thursday morning, my boss told me the client had to reschedule our Friday meeting, which meant I suddenly had a free afternoon. I finished up the communication with some other leads I was in talks with and realized I could leave the office early. I called Quinn to let her know I was heading home early. She sounded surprised. There was a pause before her next response. I asked how her day was going, the way I always did. She told me she was crazy busy. She said she probably wouldn't be home until 9 or 10 that night. I offered to pick up dinner so she wouldn't have to worry about cooking when she got home. She said that would be great, but she sounded distracted. She told me she really had to go because she was on a clock and needed to get her numbers finished. I told her I loved her, and she told me she loved me back. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a minute, feeling weird about the conversation. Quinn seemed like she couldn't wait to get off the phone. I went home that afternoon and had a nice, relaxing shower. I responded to some of my work emails from the day before, but as it got dark outside, I decided to do something romantic to cheer her up. There was a coffee shop a few blocks from Quinn's office that made these amazing cinnamon rolls she loved. I thought I would surprise her by bringing her favorite coffee and a pastry to help her get through her long evening at work. I got to the coffee shop and it was busy as usual, but I didn't mind waiting. The barista put everything in a nice bag and I drove toward Quinn's office building, feeling good about surprising her. Quinn worked on the 15th floor of a downtown office building. I'd been there plenty of times to pick her up for lunch. The receptionist always remembered me and would call up to Quinn's department to let her know I was there. But when I walked into the lobby that afternoon, she looked confused to see me. She greeted me and asked if I was there to see Quinn. I told her I'd brought Quinn some coffee and a snack because I knew she was having a busy day. The receptionist's expression got even more confused. She told me that Quinn had left hours ago, saying she was having really bad cramps and needed to go home sick. That was in the afternoon. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I asked if she was sure Quinn had left that afternoon. The receptionist confirmed that yes, Quinn had looked really uncomfortable and said she was going straight home to rest. I stood there holding Quinn's coffee, trying to process what the receptionist had just told me. Quinn had left work 6 hours ago, but earlier, she told me she was busy with work and wouldn't be home until late. I walked back to my car on shaky legs, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation, but even as I tried to think of reasonable explanations, I knew something was wrong. Quinn would have told me if she'd left work sick. She would have called me, asked me to bring her soup or medicine, or just to come home and take care of her. I sat in my car in the parking garage. I needed to think clearly. I decided to call Quinn and see what she'd say. I needed to test whether she'd stick to the story about being busy at work or if she'd tell me the truth about leaving early. I called her number, trying to keep my voice normal. She answered after 3 rings. I told her I was wondering about that recipe for the chicken thing she'd made last week because I was thinking about trying to make it for her that night. It was a dumb excuse for calling, but I needed to hear what she'd say about where she was. She asked which chicken recipe I meant. I said the one with the herbs that she'd gotten from that cooking website. She said she'd send me the link later, then told me she and Karen were locked in a conference room trying to get audit reports finished, and her boss was breathing down their necks. Karen was Quinn's coworker, someone she'd mentioned before. The story sounded believable, except I knew it was completely false. I told her that it sounded stressful and to take care of herself. She hung up quickly, and I sat there holding my phone, feeling sick. Quinn had just lied directly to my face about where she was and what she was doing. She wasn't at work. She'd left hours ago, telling her receptionist she was going home sick, but she just told me she was locked in a conference room working late. My first thought was to drive home, but something told me that wasn't the answer I was going to find. Then I remembered something that might help me figure out where Quinn really was. Over a year ago, we'd connected our phones through the Find My app. It started because Quinn had a habit of misplacing her phone around the house, and I'd lose mine in my car or at the gym. We thought it would be convenient to be able to locate each other's phones if they went missing. I'd never used the app to check on Quinn's location, and I'd never had a reason not to trust her. But sitting in that parking garage, holding coffee that was getting cold, I knew I needed to know where my wife really was. I opened the Find My app on my phone. The app loaded, showing my location in the downtown parking garage. Then it showed Quinn's phone location, and my heart sank. She wasn't at her office. She wasn't at home. According to the app, Quinn was at a hotel about 20 minutes away in a part of town that had no connection to her work or anywhere she'd have a reason to be. I stared at the little dot on the map that represented my wife's location, and I felt something inside me break. There was no innocent explanation for this. Quinn had lied about being at work while she was at a hotel. I could have called her again to confront her and demand an explanation. But something stopped me. I don't know what it was, but I realized that confronting Quinn right now would be a mistake. She'd have time to come up with a story to turn things around on me, to make me feel like I was wrong for not trusting her. Instead, I decided to get proof of what was happening. If Quinn was cheating on me, I needed evidence that she couldn't deny or explain away. I drove towards the hotel where the app said she was located. It was a nice place, the kind of hotel that business travelers used. The parking lot was big enough that I could drive around without being obvious about what I was doing. It took me about 10 minutes of searching before I spotted Quinn's car. It was parked toward the back of the lot, away from the main entrance. I parked a few spots away and took out my phone. I took several photos of Quinn's car, making sure to get the license plate clearly visible. Then I took a short video showing the vehicle, the license plate, and the hotel in the background. As I captured all these, I was lost in thought. After 8 years of marriage, my wife was cheating on me with some guy I had never seen before. She'd been lying to me for who knows how long, making up stories about work while she could actually be spending time in hotels with another man. The drive home felt like it took forever. I kept thinking about all the times Quinn had said she was working late, all the business trips, all the nights she'd come home tired. How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told me? As I got home, I tried to go about my normal evening routine. I changed out of my clothes, made myself a sandwich, and sat down to watch TV. Quinn came home around 9:30, which was earlier than she'd said she would, but still late enough to support her story about working. I heard her car in the driveway. She came in looking exactly like someone who'd had a long, tiring day at work. Her makeup was a little smudged, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had that expression she always wore when she'd been dealing with difficult clients. But I knew it was all fake. The tired expression, the work clothes, and the story she was about to tell me about her horrible day at the office. All of it was carefully constructed to hide what she'd really been doing. She asked how my day was. It was such a normal question, the kind of thing we asked each other every day. But hearing her ask it now, knowing that she'd spent the evening in a hotel with another man, made me feel sick. But I told her it was fine, not looking at her. Quinn waited for me to ask about her day, which was usually what happened next in our routine. When I didn't say anything, she started talking anyway. She launched into a story about what a disaster her day had been. She said that the audit she'd been telling me about turned into a huge mess. She claimed she and her coworker were stuck in that conference room for hours, going through files. She said her boss kept coming in every 20 minutes, asking for updates they didn't have yet. She was good at this, I realized. The story sounded believable. She had details and names and frustrations that seemed real. If I hadn't seen her car at that hotel, if I hadn't caught her in the lie about leaving work early, I would have believed every word. But yet, I said nothing. Quinn waited for me to say something, but I didn't. I couldn't trust myself to have a normal conversation with her. Everything I wanted to say would have given away what I knew. She tried to get me to talk, asking about anything that came to her mind. I just kept nodding. After a while, she gave up and went to take a shower. When Quinn came back downstairs, I had moved to the guest bedroom. I was sitting on the bed, still trying to process how good the woman I married is at lying. Quinn appeared in the doorway, wearing her pajamas, looking confused. She asked why I was in there. I didn't say anything. She asked if she'd done something wrong. The question almost made me laugh. Did she do something wrong? She lied to me multiple times, and then came home and continued lying. But I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. I told her I just needed some space. Quinn stood in the doorway for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out what was going on. She probably ran through all the possible reasons I might be upset with her, but I doubt she considered that I might know about her affair. She said goodnight and went to our bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts, anger, and my broken heart. I didn't sleep much that night. I thought about all the lies Quinn had told me, not just that day, but probably for months. But mostly, I thought about what I was going to do next. I could have confronted Quinn the next morning. I could have shown her the photos and demanded an explanation. I could have yelled at her or begged her to end the affair and try to save our marriage. But something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was how easily she'd lied to me over and over again, without any sign of guilt. Maybe it was realizing that the woman I'd been married to for 8 years wasn't the person I thought she was. Whatever it was, I knew that confronting Quinn wasn't what I wanted to do. She'd made her choice, and now I needed to make mine. The next morning, Quinn tried to act normal. She made coffee, asked about my plans for the day, and mentioned that she might have to work late again. I could tell she was still confused about why I'd slept in the guest room, but she was trying not to make it into a bigger issue. I continued avoiding any real conversation. When Quinn left for work, I called in sick to my office and spent the day researching divorce attorneys. I'd never thought about getting divorced before. Even when Quinn and I had problems, the idea of ending our marriage never seriously crossed my mind. But sitting in my living room, looking at lawyers' websites and reading about property division and asset protection, I knew this was what I had to do. I found an attorney who specialized in divorce cases involving cheating. Her website said she had 15 years of experience helping people navigate the legal and emotional challenges of ending marriages that had been damaged by affairs. I called her office and explained my situation briefly. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon to discuss my options. The attorney turned out to be a woman in her 40s with a direct manner that I found reassuring. I showed her the photos and videos I'd taken, explained about Quinn's lies, and told her I wanted to file for divorce. She told me I had strong evidence of adultery and that it should work in my favor regarding property division and other aspects of the divorce. She asked if I thought my wife knew that I was aware of the affair. I told her no, that Quinn thought I was just upset about something minor. Her advice was to keep it that way until we were ready to serve her with papers. She explained that the element of surprise would prevent her from hiding assets or trying to manipulate the situation. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with the attorney to prepare divorce papers while maintaining the pretense of normal life with Quinn. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Quinn did come home late once in a while, telling me stories about work that I knew were lies. She continued trying to get me to talk about what was bothering me, becoming increasingly frustrated when I wouldn't talk to her. She stormed off to our bedroom one night, claiming I was being difficult for no reason. The attorney finished preparing the divorce papers 3 weeks after our first meeting. The paperwork was comprehensive, requesting an equitable division of our assets and citing Quinn's adultery as the grounds for divorce. My attorney asked if I was sure I was ready for this. She reminded me that once we served these papers, there would be no going back to pretending everything was normal. But I knew I was ready. She arranged for the papers to be served to Quinn at her office. I thought about the irony of that. Quinn would be at work, probably planning her next excuse to meet her lover, when a process server would hand her divorce papers that would change everything. I was at home when it happened, around 4 in the evening on a Thursday. I knew the exact moment Quinn got the papers because my phone started ringing immediately. I didn't answer. Quinn called 6 times in a row, then started sending text messages. She asked what this was and demanded I call her right away. She said she didn't understand what was happening and pleaded with me to call her back. She asked if I was serious about this and said we needed to talk. I ignored all of it. Quinn came home early that day, which was probably the first time in months she'd actually left work when she said she did. She appeared in the doorway holding the divorce papers, her face flushed and her eyes wide. She demanded to know what this was. I was in the living room when she came in, asking me what this was. I told her calmly that they were divorce papers. She said she could see that, but asked why. She wanted to know what was going on and said I couldn't just serve her with divorce papers without talking to her first. I told her that, actually, I could. Quinn sat down across from me, still holding the papers like she couldn't quite believe they were real. She said she didn't understand and that she knew I'd been upset about something lately. But this was crazy. She asked if I wanted to end our marriage because I was mad at her. For some reason I wouldn't even tell her. I looked at my wife and saw a stranger. This woman, who was sitting in my living room, acting confused and hurt, had been betraying me for months. She'd been lying to my face every single day, making me feel guilty for being distant when she was the one destroying our marriage. I told her quietly that I knew about the hotel. The change in Quinn's expression was immediate. The confusion disappeared, replaced by something like panic. She asked what hotel, but her voice was different now. Instead of answering, I took out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken that day 3 weeks ago. Quinn's car is in the hotel parking lot. The Find My app screenshot shows her location. Quinn stared at the photos, and I watched her completely panic. She said she could explain. I told her no, she couldn't. I told her about going to her office and learning she'd left early, claiming to be sick. Quinn tried several different approaches over the next hour. She tried to minimize what had happened, claiming it was just a mistake and didn't mean anything. She tried to blame me, saying I'd been distant and inattentive and she'd felt neglected. She wanted to promise it would never happen again and begged me to give her another chance. But I was done listening to Quinn's explanations with promises and manipulations. I'd heard enough of her lies. Quinn cried, pleaded, and tried to convince me. But the woman sitting across from me wasn't the person I'd married. Maybe she never had been. The divorce process took months. Quinn tried various tricks to change my mind or delay the proceedings. But my attorney had prepared for that. The evidence of Quinn's affair was clear and undeniable, which strengthened my position in every aspect of the divorce. Quinn's lover turned out to be a man I know from afar in commercial real estate. I have no idea how they met and how long their fling has been. The hardest part of the whole experience wasn't the legal process or the property division or even the betrayal itself. The hardest part was realizing that I'd been living with a stranger for years. The woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with had never really existed. But there was something powerful about the way I handled the situation. By staying silent instead of confronting Quinn, I'd maintained control over the situation. My silence had been more devastating to Quinn than any argument or confrontation could have been. She'd spent 3 weeks knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what I knew or what I was planning. When the divorce was finalized, I felt sad. But I was free from a marriage that had been built on lies, free from a woman who'd been willing to betray me while smiling to my face every day. A year later, I'm in a much better place. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone betrays you isn't to fight or argue or try to save what's already broken. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to quietly protect yourself, make your own plans, and let your actions speak louder than any words ever could. In the end, saying nothing said everything that needed to be said.